Dr. John Burdett from Azusa Pacific University here with us for an interview. Dr. Burdett and I go back a couple of years now. And once again, just like Dr. Stoffel, I consider him another really good friend of mine. I've had the pleasure of sitting in on some of his rehearsals with his bands. And I don't know if he thought I was joking, but, I've always asked him like, hey, how old are you? I want you to come direct our bands just because I've enjoyed his rehearsals so much. But thanks for coming on, John. We're super excited to have you. And, I guess we could just start off with just telling us a little bit about yourself and what you're currently doing and what led you to the point that you're at right now.
Yeah, well, it's great to be here, James. Great to see you, and looking forward to our conversation today. Well, man, I guess how far back do we want to go? Now I'm the band director at APU, as well as a program director for music education, and do a lot of things with recruiting and so forth beyond my typical teaching duties and conducting duties. I grew up in Northern California, small town there. Started playing clarinet in 5th grade because we were too poor to rent a saxophone. I wanted to play saxophone, but it wasn't in the cards at that point. And then went through high school, was a drum major, did all that kind of stuff. Actually did my undergrad at Azusa Pacific back at the turn of the century. And I went on to do a master's degree at Cal State LA and do my doctorate at the University of Illinois. And then I've taught at Cal Poly Pomona and Mount Sac before I came to APU. So I'm a sax player by trade, although I do more conducting and researching and teaching now. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. That's cool. I don't think I knew that you did your undergrad at APU. Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, cool. It's probably really neat to come back and be the director of bands where you kind of had your first go at it after high school. That's neat.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It is very.
Well, speaking of that, I was hoping that you could tell us a little bit about your experience as a student, starting in high school and college. Really, I'm curious if the educators that I get along with so well, what your experience was as a young person, if any, with Marine recruiters or, military recruiters in general. Kind of just talk us through your decision process and thought process about, an interaction you've had with military bands or military recruiters as a student.
Yeah, I didn't have any interaction with military musicians as a high schooler or even as a college student, actually, at least that I recall as an undergrad. Growing up, I had a number of family friends who were officers in various branches, a couple colonels and so forth. So I had some interaction with military personnel through those family relationships. And then in terms of recruiters, there was not any music element, but after I took the ASVAB as a high schooler, the Navy wanted me to join their nuclear program. And so I remember interacting with them quite a bit. Ultimately did not want to be in a big metal tube under the water for extended periods of time, but so that was really it, but not with any musicians. And I don't even know if I had the capacity at that age to make those sort of decisions about which direction to go with as it relates to military musician. But on the whole, I had a really great perception of the military, and the recruiters were great and so forth, but not any specifically music.
Okay. Same thing with like college and, undergrad, post-grad.
Yeah. Undergrad. No. It wasn't until my doctoral program when I was in a cohort, and some of my good friends, one ended up becoming the head of Navy bands. And so that was, I would say, my time with Ken was where I really started to see what military music had to offer someone in terms of a career, and just to sort of peel back the curtain of what really goes on. Because from the outside, I look at all the albums of the President's Own and things, and I take all of my preconceived notions of how music occurs in civilian life, or the collegiate life, and I apply it to the military. And there's some things I go, well, why are they doing it that way? That doesn't make any sense to me, because I'm coming from this vantage point. But I would say my time with some other military musicians during my doctoral program helped open my eyes to what life in the military music is like.
Did you ever think about going down that path, or was it just something kind of curious that your friends were doing at the time?
Right. I didn't, mainly because I think I was so oriented towards the collegiate music world.
Mm-hmm.
And no one had really talked to me to ask, no one had sort of posed the question, no one had sort of recruited me at that point. And it had, even if they had, I don't know how I'd have responded, but that's where I think I first saw how this could be a good life, a good way to bring my musicianship to bear in a setting that I find to align with a lot of my purpose in life in terms of helping others and a life of service and whatnot. So, but at that point, I don't think I did.
No, I mean, it makes sense. Most people I talk with that didn't end up doing it out of college, or not too many people can meet the requirements straight out of high school. There's definitely some. Yeah, right. There's definitely some studs out there who can pull it off.
There's no way I would have.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I would I wish we had a time machine to go back and see, because I don't agree with you just based on knowing your musicianship now. But it's funny because for my personal story, and I kind of talked about it a little bit on my last interview. If you had found me maybe like an hour before really the only presentation I had during school from Marine recruiters, they came into one of my rehearsals, right? Mm-hmm. If you'd have asked me, shoot, even 5 minutes before that, or maybe right when they walked in the room, I was even a little nervous, for those that know my story in more detail. If you had asked me before that talk, it wasn't really a thought in my mind, right? I always had a positive look on the military. I had men in my family who had served in the military, so I had nothing but respect for people who'd served. But for some reason, it just didn't click with me until I had an opportunity to talk with somebody. And the funny thing is, my recruiter didn't know a whole lot of intimate knowledge or intimate details about specifically the music portion of the Marine Corps. But he did know a lot about the Marine Corps and who Marines were and what we were about. And he knew enough to say that, hey, this is who we are as Marines, and you could play music professionally if you were invited to do this, if you made the requirement. And that was enough for me. But I always kind of wonder if those recruiters hadn't come into that classroom that day, I wouldn't have had these opportunities that I've had in the Marine Corps for the past 13 and a half years. I'm not saying that's necessarily a good thing or necessarily a bad thing. I think for me, it was a really good thing, based on where I grew up and what my experiences were. And for me, it was good. But I do think it's interesting. And that's what I try and tell educators. It's certainly not going to be for everybody, but it's always good for young musicians to hear about this and learn about this. So that way, they can at least have the exposure to it to ask questions and make a decision for themselves. But yeah, I feel like that's a pretty common theme too. If you never had anyone come in and talk, it, why would it be on your mind? You have other things that you're looking at. But okay, awesome. So what is, as a music educator then, after you graduated and got all your degrees, what has been your experience with the Marine Corps and with Marine music and Marine recruiters since being an educator?
Yeah, well, I think I don't recall if you were the first recruiter that I had met. You're certainly the first one I remember.
I'm glad to hear it.
So, once I took over at APU 7 years ago now, 2013 or so, I think is when you first made contact with me, and we had met, and you came to rehearsal and talked to the band, and so I think you sort of paved the way for a relationship. And then now with the various recruiters who are close to my campus and who are assigned to my area, You know, I consider us friends and colleagues at this point, in large part because of your work in establishing that with the workshop and keeping up. So it's just an extension of our relationship, what occurs with those recruiters. But you know, they're fantastic. They're professional. They're smart. They're easy to work with, and I think I recognize what they're trying to accomplish, and they recognize what I'm trying to accomplish, and there are places where our two purposes meet. And so I think just you know, when I want to give my students the most opportunity possible, and I think that marine music is another great option. I mean, I've had former students go in, who enlisted, are now marine musicians. So I think I believe in it. And so my interaction with recruiters is great. I mean, and you know this, I had planned a Veterans Day in a relationship with our, you know, on-campus veterans office. We had planned a Veterans Day celebration. So, I mean, I think highly enough of you guys that, you know, I called you and said, what can you do to help? And, you know, you help provide a guest speaker and the rest. So, you know, it's great. All great experiences with recruiters and with the various other Marines who are coming on campus and that I interact with.
Yeah, no, I've had a lot of fun working with you, John. I do the whole West Coast, right? So I kind of all up and down the Western Seaboard and some of the Pacific Islands and things like that, and Alaska and Montana and Northern Idaho and Oregon, Washington, California. I go everywhere, right?
Right.
So I definitely meet many different types of people who have varying different ideas of what it is that we do and what we're trying to offer students. And I'll just leave it there. And it's been a pleasure working with you for sure, because you've always been friendly and welcoming, and we're always trying to create a mutually beneficial experience for everybody. And man, it's been a blast. I mean, we've had you opened up your facilities for the Marine Corps Jazz Orchestra to come and do their rehearsals up there last year. And that was a lot of fun. And, you know, I have a really good commander, Colonel Conway, who came out to that Veterans Day event. You know, I don't have to have been there to know that his speech was probably really fun to watch and really interesting. So it's been fun to kind of work together. And as you said, some of your students, as a result of our relationship and just learning a little bit, have decided that this is the path that they want to go. And so we're very happy to have them. We have a pretty rigorous screening process. So if we onboard somebody, it's because we know they're here for the right reasons, and that's who we're looking for, you know? But yeah, we've loved working with you guys over there at APU, and the recruiters have nothing but great things to say about the campus there. And
that's good.
And how friendly you guys are. So we really appreciate that up here. Speaking of your students, after having spoken with some of them, hopefully after they've been in various stages of the training pipeline or gotten out to their Marine Corps bands, how has that experience been for you, seeing some of your students, you know, being in your classroom and then moving on to play professionally with the Marine Corps?
Yeah, you know, I have two in mind right now, actually, one really recent and then one from many years ago. Megan, who's now in the D&B group in DC, you know, that's on trumpet. And then most recently, Nathaniel, who's I think in the San Diego band now, if I remember correctly. But either way, you know, that one, Megan was probably over a decade ago or close to that. No, maybe not that long. I'm getting old. I can't tell. But either way, you know, it's been a joy to watch them because they have just flourished in these settings. And of course, I'm most proud that we're training musicians who can get into, who can pass your screening process because of how rigorous it is. So I'm very pleased with that. But it's, you know, it's been a simple process. You know, I think that you guys do a great job of laying out the process from audition to heading off to boot camp. And so I think I sort of see it as a concierge type service where you guys are just so focused on helping them get from we're meeting to they've signed to we're moving on to boot camp going on. I appreciate the way that the instrumental music world is a lot like a family, and I think you
Mhm.
guys do a good job of keeping that same watchful eye over those who end up enlisting. Um, so I especially, something I think is really important for my college students is, and I tell them the first year after you graduate is the hardest year of your life. I had a mentor tell me that, and I think for musicians especially, who are gigging or trying to get jobs in education or the like, you're competing against other people who have experience. So when you get out in the professional world is when you have the least amount of experience. So just simply putting bread on the table is challenging.
Right.
And so I think that that time directly after whether it's high school or after college, that time directly after that is a really important time to provide for yourself, but then to be in a position that you're still practicing so that if you have career goals further down the road, you're still setting yourselves up for that. If you start working at Starbucks right after you graduate and that's all you're doing and your horn goes down, you are now losing to all the others who are now practicing. So I think
Sure.
when I think about my students and opportunities for them, military music makes a lot of sense because it keeps them on their horn. And whether they make an entire lifelong career out of it or they do 5 years,
Just the
10
4
years and
years.
then move
Right.
out into civilian life, they're still been practicing. Their musicianship has had that maturity going on. So in terms of the experience for them, though, I kind of got the ball lost in the weeds. It's been great. I had so much fun to see Megan because I don't see Megan because she's in DC now. I
Mhm.
don't really see her ever. So the time that I went out with the workshop, what was that, 2 years ago now, to see her I was just so proud of her because she's playing really high levels and she's such a pro and just the esprit de corps that comes from Marine musicians just makes me so proud as a former teacher. And then most recently, Nathaniel, it's interesting because he's he's a woodwind doubler. His saxophone's his primary. I think I stuck him on clarinet in my wind ensemble to give him more clarinet experience. So, because he was a music ed major, I wanted him to have more experience on clarinet for
Yeah.
his future students. But then I think
That worked out for him.
it
Yeah.
worked out because he passed the screening on clarinet, and so it's been great. It's been good for him too. I'm just so proud of him, and uh, I think what I'm most proud of, and I don't know if I'm supposed to talk about this if you want to, James, but you can edit this
Go
out
ahead.
if you want.
Yeah.
But he came back after boot camp, and after a couple of weeks, and he brought me a gift, and it was this really rich moment as a teacher. And so what's been the thing that's most surprising, what you've enjoyed? And he said, uh, the service element that is pushed in the Marines and the service element that's a priority in my life, the way that
Mm.
those two have merged has been a really impactful thing. That was a really special thing for me to hear from Nathaniel's perspective. So um, anyway, it's been great. Those two students that I've had go on that I'm highlighting now.
No, that's huge. And trying to figure out a good way to put this. I can see how it's a surprising thing for someone to hear from such a young person saying that my service goals are marrying up with the Marine Corps' focus on service. Um, but yeah, I think it's just because I've been doing it for so long. It just seems like it's indoctrinated in you from day
Yeah.
one that we're all here to serve. That's anyone in the military, and that's not just bandsmen. It's not just musicians. It's anyone who joins the military, especially the Marine Corps. It's about serving others. It's about bringing your talents to bear in the service of others, in the service of your country, and um, just your fellow human being, right? And
Yeah.
music has such a unique way of doing that because
Mm-hmm.
music's its own language. Music's able to speak when words aren't,
Mm-hmm.
and it's for a lot of us, it's just kind of the perfect marriage of the two.
Mm-hmm.
Um, bringing our talents to bear for the service of others. And that's a requirement for us. And when I say us, that's all Marines. And that's the biggest difference. When people ask me what's the difference between being a musician in the Marine Corps and being a musician anywhere else, I tell them, well, it's the same thing that's different about being a Marine versus being anyone else. It's just a set of values that we live by and we're pretty fanatical about. And I think sometimes that surprises people until they experience it for themselves. But it's definitely neat to see. But yeah, you mentioned a little bit about the educators workshop. We did a music educators workshop a couple of years ago, and we invited really just a few of really what we thought were the best music educators on the West Coast. And we wanted them to come see what the entire Marine Corps music program was about and what the Marine Corps was about. And I was hoping that you could talk a little bit about that and any experiences in there that stood out to you, or anything that surprised you, or anything that was kind of reaffirmed for you just by seeing it in person. So if you could just talk about your experience being invited to and coming out to that workshop, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. We'd be here all day, James. You're gonna have to limit me here.
Do it. Yeah. That's what editing's for.
it was inspirational. It was one of the best experiences of my life. I mean, when I think back, it was just nonstop inspiration. So for those who might be watching or listening, that group of us went to DC and spent like 3 days just going through and sort of living with Marine musicians over those days to see what life is like. And so we spent some time at Quantico. We spent some time with President Sohn, and spent some time at 8th and I and the D&B group. So, I mean, what was most impressive is just the level of professionalism. It's what, I want to instill in my students. It's the way I want to run my program, where it's just top notch. Everything that's going on is of the highest caliber. So that's spectacular. The Friday night D&B presentation at 8th and I don't remember what that's exactly called.
Yeah, the Friday evening parade. Yep, the evening parade.
That was it's just life-changing. I'm very proud to be an American. America is not perfect, but it is the best country in the world, and because of its set of ideals. And when I see those ideals celebrated, I get very happy, because I think good things happen. The best ideas bring about human flourishing. So those ideas that I see celebrated there just get me all jacked up. And so it was powerful. I mean, tears, that sense of pride, that sense of patriotism was very special. I mean, no joke. I called my wife at some point. I was 3 months past the enlistment age. But at that, I called my wife and was like,
I remember us talking about that.
This is amazing. I kind of want to enlist. And I looked at, or I think I'd asked you, or I looked online or whatever. I was like, I missed by 3 months. But I mean, it made that much of an impact on me that I had those thoughts after, so in some ways achieving the career goals that I had set out for many years ago. So it was just hugely impactful. I think the other thing, the camaraderie that I sensed with the Marine musicians, and obviously I had a relationship with you, but then there were other folks who came alongside on that workshop trip. So to meet them, to hear about their lives, to understand their sacrifices, to understand their roles and what they had committed to in their life, to see the discipline, to see the esprit de corps. I mean, when you spend 3 days with other musicians, you get to know them very well. And I'm just inspired by how they're living their lives, and it makes me want to live better. So I think that was all just spectacular. I mean, the time at Azusa Hall there with the President's Zone was of course
that was
a
fun.
significant highlight, as I've of course followed them for many years, and to spend time with Colonel Fettig and then my time there, when Fedig and the group was here in LA, got to spend some time with them there. So just the relationships that are built, I think, are what are have been so impactful. Man, what else? The Marine Corps Museum was also life-changing. I mean, I'm trying to bring my family back in October to DC, and we'll definitely be going to the Marine Corps Museum. So I think those were all spectacular things. Also, as we all know, we have the performance side of things, but then there's the other 99% of the background of all that, just instrument repair to scheduling to how to set up all the various needs of the Marine, the top brass and what they want from you guys, and in terms of ceremonies and the logistics and all that. So to see all the behind the scenes of that, I find really exhilarating too. And just to see the professionalism with which everyone is operating is it's just top notch. It's top notch. I don't
So
know. Am I missing anything?
No, I'm curious about something though, because you work so intimately with the music ed program at APU, and you talked about the logistics of how the Marine Corps bands kind of prepare and just kind of the organizational, how they get it done, how they go about doing it. A common thread that I've heard from newer educators, usually at the high school or middle school level, fresh out of an undergraduate program or maybe a couple just out of postgrad. One of the common things I hear is that they at first are just kind of overwhelmed by the amount of logistics and all of the everything that's kind of going on, that they didn't feel quite ready for coming out of college. And I don't have a music education degree. I joined really young. I was one of those weirdos that got offered a spot at a young age. I think I got lucky, but I worked hard enough to put myself in a position to be lucky too. But anyway, I don't have that experience of coming out of an undergraduate program as a civilian and then moving right into public school teaching. But it seems like that's one of the biggest stressors that they have. So when people ask me about it, I tell them, well, another great thing that you can learn in the Marine Corps bands is just how to run an organization, that organizational leadership, even down to the minutia of the tactical level. How do you get things done? How do you delegate tasks? How do you set up your leadership chain to make sure that everything is happening in a timely manner, but that people can get their other tasks done all at the same time? And that seems to have been really valuable. I served with a few people with a few Marines that left the Marine Corps after their first 4-year enlistment. They moved on to become a music educator. They got their education degree while they were in the Marine Corps, and now they're teaching high school. And I've never heard a single one of them complain about like, the logistics are tough, or like it seems to be a difference. So I just kind of wanted your take, after having a lot of experience in the education of music educators, and then your little bit of experience with the Marine Corps bands, because I think you and I have opposite experiences. So I'm just curious as your perspective of that, of the possible value for someone looking to get into music education.
I mean, logistics, administration, all of that is a giant part of what we do. It is interesting, when you're usually an instrumental teacher, you're usually the only one, so you're doing everything. What I enjoyed about I saw like at Quantico is that the camaraderie, the sense of team orientation to accomplishing a mission, the logistics to accomplish setups of various events and whatnot. That was, I think, something that's a little unique, but still, when you got to get 50 people with instruments to a place, that just takes logistics. And I think that's one of the great things. I'm passionate about forming people, forming students, and the process of the logistics is another process by which people are being formed. It's part of the curriculum in a sense. Just like I want them to learn scales, I want them to learn how to operate a group of people and accomplish a goal for their own lives. I think this is important. In addition to the ensemble and the students or their peers who they're leading. And I do find that the people who are able to administrate well go further in life.
Mm.
because you typically can't administrate when your own house isn't in order, which means I got to make sure that my business is in order. And by looking outwards to help others, that almost inherently causes the individual to then get better on their own. So I'm not sure that the question is where you're headed, but um, I do think it's a good skill. It's a good lifelong skill, and no doubt, undergrads. That's the thing with undergrads, because they're coming to a leadership role from the musical standpoint. They're moving to a leadership role, but that may or may not set them up for logistical or administrative skills. And so,
Sure.
no doubt the Marines are setting individuals up for success in that regard because of the amount of logistics that they're responsible for, musically and not. I remember talking with some of the other folks, and they had secondary expertises in things that they were, water treatment or whatever else. So they've got all these other logistics that they're handling. So yeah, I think that's a lot of similarities.
No, I think you hit on a key point there, like the character building of somebody who wants to be an effective leader, right? You and I share the same belief system, but not to get too deep into that. The Marine Corps believes in servant leadership. Leaders eat last. You take care of your people, because if you take care of your people, they'll take care of you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the only way we know how to lead is by getting out in front and getting it done. And the other thing is that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. They have to know that you care about them if you expect them to follow you and get on board and make strides towards a common goal. So I think the minutia of logistics, it's cool because you can see a good example of it. It might, it's obviously going to play a little bit differently in a high school, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you don't have the Uniform Code of Military Justice as kind of your backdrop, if people aren't doing their job. But, when you get into, here's a structure how you could do it if you were able to gain your influence from something other than positional authority, because obviously, any true leader is going to want to lead from anything other than positional authority,
right?
As often as possible, at least, so.
And I think too, as it's a relationship to music education, you could be a brilliant musician, but if you can't organize anything, it's not going to help you. Right. Your musicianship, I actually think your organizational ability is probably more important than your musical ability. Now, some of my colleagues might disagree with that, and I'm not sure how much I believe that, other than to say I think administration is essential to make that happen. And even when you look at 20th century music education in America, I don't know if you knew this, but really, band is a big thing in American schools. That started somewhere, and that started primarily when back after the First and Second World Wars, when all these military musicians, their enlistments were up, they went into public schools and started teaching.
Right.
And so between instrument manufacturers getting their act together and then having now all of these highly competent and highly organized bandsmen go into schools, those two things really brought about the school band movement. There's some other factors, but I think without the ingredient of those military bandsmen coming into schools and then having the logistical and musical capability to take large groups of people and move them in a common direction. I mean, that was essential to making that whole thing happen.
Right. No, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I don't think I've considered that way. That's interesting. I mean, because that did happen. I mean, everyone came back from World War II, and then you got, all these military musicians teaching. That's neat. Yeah. Okay. With the music educators workshop that you went on and just the experiences that you've had with Marine music, what do you think that your students and fellow educators should know about the Marine Corps music program that they might not be considering?
What should they know? Well, I think from I kind of approach this two ways. One is the individual, and then the organization. I think what they should know is that the Marine musicians are really professional musicians, and they're dedicated to musical excellence. and they have the reward system and accountability system to bring that to life. I think also they should know that it's quite similar to what they're already doing. What I said earlier, the instrumental world is so similar, right? How you get good on trumpet serves you whether you go into music to be a music major or whether you go into military music. I mean, discipline, passion, commitment, focus, being hungry for excellence, investing in a mission, personal responsibility, individual growth, all that kind of stuff that an instrumentalist is developing or should be in a high quality program is the same thing that Marine musicians are bringing to life as well. So I think people ought to know that Marine music is quite similar to what they've already experienced.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's quite different because it is 24/7. At least that was the impression that I got. You could speak it to be had.
We're always Marines.
But it's 24/7. So there's a difference there. And so I think high schoolers and undergrads and so forth are developing these traits, and so they can bring those to life in the setting. But the setting is different. It is unique. Mm-hmm. It is unique. It is a peak levels. I think is what I would describe it as. So then they also should know there's a ton of performing. There is a lot of performing, and the performances might be different than what the students may have experienced before. But there are ceremonies all the time. There are rehearsals all the time. In that way, I think it's a lot like an undergraduate music education, at least at our school, where it is tons of rehearsing and tons of performing. So I think folks who are interested in Marine music ought to know that. But then also, I think that in some way, at least here in California and Los Angeles, I think music making can sometimes have a little bit of vanity tied to it. Because of the music industry. And I think that's one place it's different. Marine music, I sensed, is it's more about a noble calling of service than it is about vanity. Right. And that's a distinction. It's a distinction.
Yeah, no, and I think that goes back to, you said that we're 24/7, right? We're always on. And I think that can confuse people until they see it. Mm-hmm. I think some people hear that and they go, well, what do you mean? Like, I'm always on call 24/7. Well, yeah, but look, your work day is still going to be pretty regular, right? You still get to go hang out with your kids on the weekend or your family or your other hobbies that you want to do. When we're saying 24/7, what we're really talking about is the idea that Marines no longer just represent themselves. You represent, to a really, really profound manner, you represent the organization. And part of that is something that we've created in our culture over the past couple of centuries of existence. But the other part of it that is created that has been just the general public and the media. And, if any one of us were to do something knuckleheaded or something a little bit, outside of the box or do something kind of dumb, for lack of a better word, the reports don't read James Keller did this and that and the other. It reads, Staff Sergeant in the United States Marine Corps. If it even says Staff Sergeant, it probably just says United States Marine messes this thing up or boogers this thing up. You know what I mean? And so you're representing everyone that went before you and all of your brothers and sisters that you work with to a level that probably doesn't exist anywhere else, right? And just the level is what's different, I think, because we all kind of try and create that mentality and we try and create that culture. But I think I haven't run into another organization that has created it so dramatically as the Marine Corps. And that's the part of it that I really like. And that's honestly the part of it that kind of attracted me to the Marine Corps, because I was frustrated about a lot of my peers growing up. And I was just always kind of a real passionate guy and a real passionate kid. And, and pretty focused on the things that I loved and what I was passionate about. And I just had a hard time finding anyone that could match that. And I wanted to go to a place where I knew that everybody around me would push me and that there would be plenty of people who were not only better than me at music, but who were maybe even a little more passionate and a little more had higher work ethic and all of these things. And I was looking to be pushed, and I wanted to be around people that I knew really wanted to be there. Recruit training and our boot camp, it's the longest and most challenging in the Department of Defense. And I think that spooks a lot of people. But for me, that's what attracted me to it, because anyone willing to go through this 13 weeks of this boot camp to be a part of this organization, to be in this band, those are the type of people that I wanted to be around, and that's one of the big reasons why I say it's not for everybody. If that's not the kind of lifestyle you're looking for, then this isn't going to fit you. And that's not a dig. It's just, it's a higher level of accountability to specific things. And you're either looking for that or you're not, not to mention that, as we already talked about, it's a pretty dramatic screening process. And by dramatic, I mean, we kind of go through things with a fine tooth comb to make sure you're the right musician, you're the right human being, you're the right, you've got everything in line to be successful in our organization. And that's the other reason why it's not for everybody. But yeah, no, I think going right back to it, it's, I think when you boil it all down, it always comes back down to character and the culture and what it is that we do. Anything for educators? Cause I mean, I think you've got a unique perspective. I think, that you didn't have so much exposure to it as a student at any level. And then I caught you 4 months too late, man. I wish we'd have caught you a little bit earlier, because man, I'd love for you to be in the program and be one of our band officers one day. But do you have any, like, based on that, do you have any specific advice for educators, as Marines are going to be asking to come into their schools and talk to their students and things like that, hopefully in the fall here after this pandemic's over, hopefully.
Yeah. Me in regards to interaction with recruiters and things like that?
Sure. Or just anything that you think it would be good for teachers or educators who haven't had as much exposure to us, them specifically.
Well, I think, first of all, I think, just open your doors, just cultivate a relationship, just get the ball rolling. Because in my opinion, this is a really, really valid and useful, and it's just a good way for students to make a life in music. So, I mean, and the first thing to do that, though, is you've got to open the door to these recruiters and these various other relationships to at least get that discussion going, to then set up the opportunity for your students. So I'd say do it. And I have found any member of the Marines to be highly flexible and to be completely willing to do whatever it is you want them to do in that situation, whether that's a lot or a little. And I've had James come in and talk for 30 minutes to my group. Other times I've had them just come in for like 5 minutes because we were prepping a concert. I didn't have the rehearsal time to accomplish that. Right. But I want face time to happen. I want my students to see that I trust these people, and so my students can trust them as well, and at least to ask questions of what life can look like for them. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but
no, I think that's
you just got to initiate.
Yeah, no, I think there's usually not usually, but I think with some folks there's maybe something that they put up a guard and they're like, oh, I don't know if I want to invite you guys in here, you know what I mean? So, no, I think it's always good to hear from another educator, your perspective on things and what your experience has been. Because, I mean, that's one of your first jobs as an educator is to protect your students. And it varies based on the level that you teach, right? But, something that they're thinking about. And we want them to know that we're here for the same reason. We're just, we not only want to talk about the Marine Corps, but anything that our guys can do to enrich your program,
Yeah, I mean, you had referenced having the Jazz Orchestra on campus. We had them rehearsing, I don't remember, was it 3 or 4 days? I don't recall exactly.
Yeah, but, I think we had like 2 days. Yeah.
I mean, I want your musicians to be near my students as much as possible so that my students see what professional work ethic looks like. And, you know, you guys did a sort of an informal concert for one of our seminar classes. And we talked, you know, I think I interviewed you guys or you guys talked about things, but just, I want my students to see what high character looks like and high musicianship looks like. That's what I want. Because I think success, you can't help but be successful when those two things happen.
Right.
Success may not occur immediately, but it's impossible for it not to happen. So anytime I can get you guys on my campus, not just to be in your, you know, your military wear, but to play your horns and go, oh, that guy's a good player. Mm-hmm. Or man, she's a beast. You know, I want my students to see that too. So yeah, the more that I can get you guys on campus, the happier I am, because it affects my students. So I would say for all music teachers, do that. You know, if you're, especially you're close to a base, you can get James into your campus, tell him to bring his horn too, and sit in with the group to see, oh, they are different from us, but they're similar to us. I think that's a really important thing for music educators to help cultivate.
Sure. Yeah, no, and that was great for us too. You know, you wouldn't really have any reason to remember all of the details, so I'll maybe paint the rest of the picture. That the Marine Corps Jazz Orchestra that we put together was Marines from across, I think that year was like across 6 or 7 different bands, and they had never played together before. The combination specifically, a few of the guys had played together before, but as a whole big band, they hadn't really had any time. And it was fun for me because it all kind of worked out where your guys' master class was actually the very first evening that we had the group together. It worked out really great because it allowed me to apply a little bit more pressure to these extremely talented musicians. And I say, hey, you better come with everything ready to go. And we're just adjusting levels because y'all got like 2 hours of rehearsal before you're playing in front of a highly respected, you know, jazz program at Azusa Pacific. So, you know, they were really excited about it, but there was, we're always trying to find a way to kind of push the Marines a little bit and build good nerves in a good way. And we always try and adjust it from calling it nervousness to excitement. You know, we've studied professional athletes, and, you know, you see all their interviews going into these big events, right? The Super Bowl or the Olympics, or just these kind of peak events that you've got from these athletes. And every once in a while they'll ask them, are you nervous? Right. And almost without fail, they'll say, I'm not nervous. I'm excited. Like I'm pumped. I'm jacked up. Let's do this. And, you know, it turns out that the same chemicals that go through your body when you're nervous are the exact same ones that go through when you're at that level of excitement. So you can just change the narrative in your head to put yourself in a better space. And so yeah, we'll create situations to push the Marines a little bit. And it's amazing. They always rise to the occasion. So like I said, I joined to work with people like that. And my brothers and sisters have made good on that promise that my recruiter gave me 13 and a half years ago. So we're trying to keep the integrity of our recruiters and what they're saying every day out in the bands, so that way we can make good on the promises that are being made. But yeah, all right. So let me grab the last one here. I guess the last thing would be, what advice do you have to those extremely talented high school kids that could do this out of high school, or, you know, your undergraduate students or postgraduate students who are looking into professional performance or education career? What advice would you give to those kind of folks about the Marine Corps bands?
Yeah. And are you thinking just high schoolers? Or are you also thinking undergrads as well?
Both. Yeah. Cause I mean, we do take high schoolers for sure. And it's kind of like the rest of the performance industry. Two things that matter are how good you are and who knows how good you are. Right. So we kind of start from there. And obviously there's just some studly high school cats that, you know, can pull it off. But they're a little more rare. The percentage is low in the high schools, but in good programs, there's one or two sitting in there that could pull it off. But the vast
Yeah.
majority of the talent pool is definitely at the university level. But if you
Yeah.
could kind of speak to both.
Yeah. Well, advice, I would say do your research. I would say try and get the best picture of what life will be like in uh, in the music area within the military. Um, I'm thinking for the undergrads, joining some of the university-based military, ROTC type activities, or even joining another reserve band
Mm-hmm.
just to get yourself into the system um, is a good way to go. And that also, I think, gives you a glimpse of the discipline and structure necessary. So for the high schoolers, that's not a reality. Although, I mean, there are some ROTC activities on high school campuses as well.
Sure. Some JROTCs and things like
Yeah.
that. Sure.
But then just on a personal level, well, the reason I said that is I think that gives you a picture of what the discipline and the rigor that you need to develop in your own life to set yourself up for then the audition and having the livelihood to then move into Marine music. So yeah, I think those are good. And how do you do your research? I think you talk with recruiters who I think will then put you in touch with Marine musicians like James and others who then can give you a more complete picture of what life is like there. But really, the only reason I'm saying that is to give you a vision so then you can begin working towards that vision now. And that's the discipline and rigor in your life now to get you to that point. Yeah, I think those would be my suggestions. Try and catch a performance if at all possible. If you're close
Sure.
to a field band or the like, I think those would be great things.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks, Dr. Burdett. I just wanted to leave it open to you one last time. If you had any more insight or any questions for me that you think would be interesting, or just kind of any parting shots that you had for the end here.
Oh boy. No, I just wanted to go back to my experience at the workshop for a moment. I just think that in this day and age, opportunities for service, and I think that young people nowadays, this millennial generation or post-millennial generation, the idea of service is somehow it's built into them somewhere. I don't know where that narrative's coming from, but there's a real desire. So there's a question of how do I serve? And I think you give your money one way. I was on listening to YouTube music and Children's Hospital of LA commercial came up. And so, it's a desire to give money. That's one way to give, but another way is to literally give your life in service. And my time in DC gave me a picture of what that life would be like in Marine music. And I think that's a good life. And as a music teacher, above all, I want my students to grow. I want them to live productive, happy, joyful lives. To me, there's a religious component to this as well. We could talk about, but I think what I saw when I spent those 3 focused days with these Marine musicians is these priorities of service are given a place to live, and there's not many other places for that. I think music teaching, that is true, but Marine music has another extra layer because it's a part of the Marines. And so I think it's a good life. And like I said, heck, 3 months earlier, I might have enlisted had I not aged out. I believe in it that much. So
mad that I'm so mad that we didn't do that tour 3 months earlier.
That's funny. That's funny. So those are my parting words.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I think that was huge. And for me, coming out of school, and the thing that I was most concerned about is finding a place that I knew I could do those things. And to me, that was probably the scariest thing about having to grow up or move out to the real world or things like that, because I was like, man, I don't know if my plan is actually going to lead me to service with my instrument, like making a living on my instrument, but also being able to lay my head down on my pillow at night, knowing that I made a difference in somebody's life with the music that I've made.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I really, really understand the difference between easy and simple. after having had this experience in the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps gave me a very simple way of bringing my talents to bear like that, and knowing that I could be a performing musician that was making a difference throughout the country and the world with my music. It was very simple. You pass these requirements. If you get invited and you make it through recruit training, and then you go to the School of Music and you do it. That's the path. If you can make it through these things, I'm guaranteeing these things that you're looking for if you pass the scrutiny of the screening and the training. Very simple, not easy, because it took a lot of work to get through all that, but so worth it. So worth it, and so simple.
Nothing in life that is good is easy.
Right.
So I appreciate that. I'm going to steal that, simple versus easy.
Yeah. It's nice when it's simple, though.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
It won't be easy, but if you could find some simple way to do it, I don't know. That's what always kind of has stuck in my headspace since joining the Marine Corps. So I'm always kind of looking for that way.
That's good.
Dr. Burdett, John, it was awesome to have you on here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks again for your time. I'm sure you're super busy given the times, and super excited to have talked with you again. And I know someone will watch this and get some value out of it, and who knows, might even change their lives. So that's always the goal. Just reach one person who this might make a difference for.
Yeah.
But
excellent.
All right. Well, thanks again, Dr. Burdett, and
Thank you.
Take care.